We talk a lot about fixing what's broken in this job, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is just to see what's already going on right. Know Your Force is a simple system that sends a quick text survey to the people you interact with. It's helping leaders see the good their teams are already doing, back their people with real data, and step in before stress turns into burnout. Learn more at knowyourforce.com. This episode is sponsored by Hero Schedule. If your department needs better scheduling software that isn't outdated, clunky, and expensive, Hero Schedule is an easy switch. It's $4 per user per month, and they give you a free 30-day trial. Get started at heroschedule.com and click on Try Hero Schedule. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tum. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. Today, I wanted to talk about organizational health and teamwork and the game changers in your unit, in your work group, in your organization. And it's not what you typically think of. It's not the hardest charger. It's not that bold leader that is producing the most and is the visionary, and he's, he or she is trying to really up level the team and motivate them. It's not necessarily that person. Sometimes it can be. You'll hear some overlaps, but sometimes it's someone that's quite a bit more subtle in approach. And it was this concept that was highlighted and featured in the Wall Street Journal in an article. It's essentially talking about the quote unquote glue employee. So this is the person that is what they sound like. They're the glue, right? They hold teams together and they make performance possible. They're also a game changer in that the people that are starting to come to mind as I think about some of these concepts, they are such a team elevator, right? So they elevate performance. They are generally pretty high achievers. They are pretty proactive and positive. However, they're the type of person that when they're around, everyone gets a little bit more out of themselves. Everyone steps up a little bit more, not in this like needing to keep up, not in this competition nature, but just because they bring out the best in people. And when you hear that and you start thinking on that concept, I would wager that many of you start thinking about names and faces of people that you work with now or you worked with in the past. Maybe they were leaders of yours, but a lot of times they're probably peers, right? A lot of times they probably worked alongside you because that's when you could see them in their most authentic space in that line leadership, right? In that peer leadership that is so crucial that we talk a lot about here. So I just wanted to share that concept. And I wanted to share some main tenets of these glue employees, like what they do, how they do it, and then what we can look out for in our teams and try to promote, not necessarily literally, but maybe, right? Promote those qualities and elevate them, recognize them for the good things they're doing, how we can think about, mobilizing and allowing them to better model, like, they're already doing the thing, but let other people pay attention and encourage them to pay attention and model what is being demonstrated. And then also flip the script and mirror on ourselves and ask, am I being like one of these glue employees? Like, am I the type of person that's holding people together? And not just in this like kumbaya kind of way, but in this, hey, the team's moving this way. Let's all come along and move this way because we're going to get a lot farther. We're going to get there a lot faster. We're going to get there a lot more satisfied. You talk about morale and culture. That's what comes to mind with this type of person and this type of dynamic or archetype as well. So a few points I'll share. They really promote psychological safety. And those terms get thrown around a lot, but they are very real in policing and police culture. There's some industries that are really good about having people speak up because it's a matter of life and death. They're really good about, kind of making the implicit explicit, right? So all these things we think about and we're kind of holding close, but just to speak it out into the world so that we can all benefit from the conversation and the lesson therein. So what does this look like though? They create psychological safety. Well, when I think about it, I think about when I'm trying to give direction or share the movement or mission to, let's say, my sergeants, or I think about it in the context of a sergeant giving their briefing to their officers. It is the person receiving or the person in the group that's receiving the direction or the message. I can think of a lot of those people. Some come to mind really quickly where they may be the first to ask a question and they do so without fear, right? They do it with confidence and they do it really respectfully. That's another key. Because there's a lot of people that can make a remark or a response that's generally not in alignment with constructive communication. They might say something like, well, this will never work, or this is BS. You think about that kind of salty archetype in policing or first responder work. But it really is more like trying to build off the conversation, maybe asking a critical question with professionalism, and then in a tone and in a spirit that you recognize that they are actually trying to gain understanding, right? And they are actually trying to have a discussion to get this mission or this vision to a concrete place that this can actually work. And maybe it's threading the line between the conceptual lofty goal and the real talk of the resources we have. And maybe it's clarifying language, right? So maybe it's saying, hey, I heard you say this. Do we have this in support of that? Or does this conflict with that? So it is recognizing that sometimes someone speaking up, again, in a professional, tactful way, can allow safety for others to speak up, right? So it's saying that, hey, the water's fine for us to have this discussion and not just be a yes person, but to have meaningful, critical conversation. It also looks like speaking up when they see something going awry, right? Being proactive, right? So it's not asking for permission all the time. Sometimes it's doing the thing that needed to be done and then communicating that. Because really, that is good intent. Really, that is the goal and the mission. A lot of times is, hey, you see something that needs to be done, do it. I trust you to do it. Let me know so that we can course correct or we can make the changes to prevent it in the future. That kind of thing also demonstrates like, hey, the water's fine. When something needs to be done, do it. Now, if people listening are hearing me say these generalities and they start thinking about, ooh, I don't know how that would work in my organization. Well, maybe we're picturing different things, but also maybe you're right. And maybe there are gaps in psychological safety. Maybe there are gaps in a trusting and a trust building culture. So I invite you to think about that and think about some of the people that are in the best position by their temperament, by their professional and personal credibility to ease that, right? They probably are your glue employees, or they probably are the glue employees on deck that can step into that role with some nudging and or some development. Okay, the second piece is they bridge silos and they bridge these different cliques and personalities. So when I think of a glue person, I think of the person that generally gets along with people. Again, they're not a yes person, they're not a yes guy or gal, but there's some people in every organization that they just make the space better when they're around, right? That's a lot of times a positive energy, not toxic positivity, but real positivity. Like, hey, we're going to focus on the good rather than the bad. We're not going to ignore the bad, but let's do effort. Let's have conversations over things that are actually going to make a difference. Like, let's focus on the work at hand, the things that need to be done, the things that we signed up to do, rather than just, you know, whining and moaning, the B word. I'm trying to keep this PG, but those things that just take away, right? They're just taking energy. Like they don't accomplish anything to whine, B word, and moan. So thinking about that again, these people that are glue, they can transcend the different cliques. They can be a little bit like a chameleon because they get along with people. They can speak the language of these different groups. And I'm not talking about code switching. I'm talking about just being able to relate to people, having strong communication skills, being able to empathize and connect with people. Some people think that that's like being disingenuous. No, that's just having good EQ and knowing your audience and speaking in an authentic way to them so that you can reach them, right? So it's more about smoothing things over than creating friction where it doesn't need to exist. They know why. So the next point, them knowing why, is because they ask why, right? They're communicative people. So it's not just do what you're told and then ask everyone else to do what's being told, but it is truly understanding. So you can understand the why when you ask the why. You can understand the why when you pay attention, when you've been around for a bit, when you have a lot of experience, when you apply your mind to decisions and you can then anticipate the whys. And you fill this in, and that looks like different versions of institutional knowledge. That looks like putting your training and experience into play with real actionable performance. That looks like actually knowing the job you're supposed to do, again having that credibility, and then being able to communicate the why and be an advocate for the mission. I was recently looking over this believe it's called like Leadership by Lincoln. So it was Leadership Tenets by Abraham Lincoln, kind of analyzing his methodologies and experiences and thought processes and achievements. But it really did underline in one section how the employees in an organization need to be on board with the mission. And some people in the first responder space might think like, oh, that's just being a yes man or yes woman. Well, technically, if you're on board with an organization, you signed up to fulfill that mission. You swore an oath. There is a mission to affect crime or to protect the vulnerable or to promote public safety. Yeah, you should be on board with those missions, right? So it is to say that yes, the group is more important than the individual. When you want to be a part of something, and in this whole conversation, we're talking about being the glue of a team, then we have to recognize how you have to be an advocate for the mission. You have to be an advocate for the organization to be an effective leader, to be an effective participant. Another point I will share is that they elevate others. I talked about that earlier to the point of how they make everyone better by just being around. But what does that look like? And a couple examples of what that really looks like is they mentor, right? A lot of times they are the unofficial leaders that it's not their job, it's not their quote unquote responsibility, but they look at it like their obligation and their duty because, again, to an earlier point, it needed to be done. It was an opportunity. It's the best outcome when I take stock in this person, when I bring them along, when I model and mentor, when I see how I can be helpful, not because it's in my job description, but because there's an opportunity there and I want to help with that. So it's about stepping up. It's definitely outlining this ownership, this sense of doing the best they can with what they have, a little bit of stoicism, right? Going back to not whining, not just complaining and focusing on all the things that we don't have and all the obstacles, but the real talk, like how do we get there? Not in this fluffy way, but in this real way. But with the limitations we have, what conversations can be had to overcome some of those limitations, but also how do we work with what we have and do the best we can, which I was talking with a boss within the last half a year, and I was like, policing has really become that. If we can go into policing every day, every month, every year with, you know what, the job is ripe with challenges. That's what we all signed up for. I'm not aware of any type of modern policing context where we didn't recognize the job was difficult and was going to have a lot of challenges with the public or with systems or anything else, with danger, with physical danger. But if we think about how we can do our best with what we have, then we will be okay. I mean, so I think more and more that's my unofficial kind of motto or strategy with policing is, yeah, do the best you have, best you can with what you have. It doesn't mean don't try to get more, like more tools, more resources, more equipment, more funding. Sure, try to do those things, but you can't do it alone. You have to do it through partnership, through relationship, and on and on. But to keep it to point on these glue employees, it's just recognizing that there's so much power in how you can affect a team, not always by what you do. We talked a lot about the what you do, but also the how you do it. And we did talk a bit about that, right? The energy you bring, the tone you bring, the ability to toggle message for the different people or the different groups. How do you become that conduit? How do you become that that squad cheerleader, or that division representative that just models good, humble work, but also really supports this notion in this dynamic of teamwork. So I really, I really hope that this conversation and these talking points were helpful for you. The first factor I would think about is, who are those people in your teams, your units, your squads, your divisions? And one, shout out to them, right? Nudge them, say, hey, you might even share like the concept, like, hey, I was like listening to this thing about glue employees and they model this and that and the other. They really help bring a team together. They keep the team together and they make the movement a lot smoother and productive. You're one of those people. You're absolutely one of those people for us. So I really appreciate you. And then start to think about, what is it about that person, right? I've rattled off a few main points and some examples. And when you're hearing this, you're probably thinking about a lot of other iterations in real time of things that you see in your organization. So what does that actually look like concretely? I'd love to hear about that. If you want to send me a line or a note, LinkedIn or on email. But also, when you know what that looks like concretely, then you can know how to promote it. So not only are we giving those people the nudge, but if you're in a position, I mean, even as a peer, you could probably shout them out to your supervisor or their supervisor, saying, "Hey, this person, this guy or gal is really doing some awesome stuff by virtue of how they show up, how they really help the team, how they help culture and morale and productivity and just team alignment, all the things." And then the third thing I would ask you to do is think about where you fall in this conversation. Regardless of your rank or role, where do you fall on this spectrum of like gluiness? Are you somebody that helps bring people together and keep people on track? Are you obstinate? Are you always devil's advocate? There's there's power in having a diverse team, a diverse command staff, a diverse sergeant cadre, a diverse squad, different opinions and viewpoints for sure. But are you always the devil's advocate that's like bringing up 10 reasons why something won't work? Because there's like a healthy version of devil's advocacy where you're offering counterpoint to make the thing more successful, to poke holes in it and then help patch them up in real time through strategy and discussion. And there's also just the devil's advocate that is the devil's advocate to fill that role because they've become really callous and cynical and good at it. I would submit to say that it's a lot easier to be the consummate devil's advocate than it is to be, the glue of an organization, where it's, yeah, let's recognize that, but let's also recognize the potential. And you know what? The mayor wants this, the chief wants that. Let's do the best we can. Let's try to actualize that, because there's some good merit to those ideas. It does help these business owners. It does help that community with the problems that they're facing there. Let's do the best we can and let's figure out how we can get there, like what that looks like. So look at what you bring to it. Maybe what examples of qualities that you can build in yourself, or what examples that you can put into practice to help your gluiness in this conversation of leadership and bringing your best to the team. So again, I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this. If you share the show out, share the newsletter out. Again, you can go to bluegritwellness.com to learn about all the comings and goings and all the updates there. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support in sharing out the content in the show, conversations on LinkedIn. It's all super helpful. I am helping with some training in this upcoming year. I'm excited to have some departmental training already booked for next year. That's super exciting and really humbling. So if you would like me to talk with your team or your unit or what have you, please reach out. I love having those conversations and finding how I can be of use and of service to you to help spread this constructive leadership conversation to help all of our teams work and groove a little bit better through resilience, through mindset, through positive culture. Thanks again for listening, and stay well. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.